For an artist
So what I
trading
did was I
card
divided
weaving,
this space in half.
you're going to start out with the
and then
artist trading
divided this
card
space
size,
in half.
2.5 by 3.5.
I'm going to do the same thing.
Piece
Add
of
one
cardboard
more
or stiff
in
paper.
between each of these spaces.
And you're going to make the same
1, 2,
amount
3,
of notches
4.
on the top.
Now it's
as
equal
on
on
the
the
top
bottom.
and on the bottom.
So what I did was I
With my
divided
scissors,
this space
I'm going
in
to
half
cut small
and then
notches.
divided this space in half.
I'm going to
So
do
I'm
the
not
same
cutting
thing.
very
Add
far
one more
in between each of these spaces.
but I'm trying to be equal
1,
with it.
2,
I'm trying to go
3,
about the same
4.
amount in. Now it's equal on the
all.
top and on the bottom. With my scissors,
Same here,
I'm going to
trying
cut
to be about
small
equal with
notches.
all of my cuts.
There we go. Now you're going to use a large piece of yarn, and you're going to take and place that inside one of the notches. So now I just have a little bit of string on the back. I'm going to use some clear tape to tape this right onto the back. Then I go from the top down to the bottom, over to the neighbor, and this takes a little fussing around. There we go, over to the neighbor, and then the bottom to the top, over to the neighbor, top to the bottom. At the end, you'll take some tape again and tape that down. I think right now I'm just going to put my name so that I don't lose this when it's done. Now let's start. Let me show you how to thread your needle. This is the needle that we will be using. It is plastic. It has this is called the eye of the needle, and we put our yarn through the eye of the needle. Now, yarn has different fibers that are wrapped together. So if you start getting fibers that start pulling apart when you're working on this, it makes it very difficult to get the yarn through the eye of the needle. You can always try to just clip that frayed part off, and then this is how I like to do it. I like to take the yarn, squeeze it in between my fingers, put the eye of the needle right next to it, and press it through like this. However, I've done this a million times, so I'm going to show you another trick that I know. You can take a piece of paper and cut a very thin strip. This strip of paper has to be able to fit 100% through the eye of the needle. It does. So then I fold that strip of paper in half. I place it through the eye of the needle, and now I have a big circle through the eye of the needle, just like this. I can take and put my yarn through that, which is way easier than the eye of the needle, and hold on to my needle, pull the paper back through, and that pulls my yarn through. Now I'm ready to start weaving this yarn into my loom. You're going to start under, over, under, over, under, over. You'll pull it all the way through until all you have is just a little tail. Now, because I ended under, I'm going to go over. The end always has to loop around the edge. So over, under, over, under, over, under. Bring that all the way through and back again. Now you're going to spend your time pushing the yarn up to the top to make it nice and tight. But you'll continue this way until you run out of yarn. Now I'm at the point where the tail, this is the tail, is almost going to be woven in. So let me show you what that looks like. If I bring this all the way through, see how now two strings are going through? We don't want that. You always want the tail to be a little too short. So you just kind of bring it up like that. Now I'll be able to get back through. Yep, for sure. I'll be able to get back through without having the tail woven in. We don't want to weave that tail in. I probably have one more time through. All right. So I can take my needle out. I'll press this up to get it nice and tight. And I have two options. I can leave the yarn just at the end like this and just trim it off, but I want to be careful so I don't trim the loom. But just trim it off, or I can use this to tie on to the next piece of yarn. So if you choose to connect the two yarns, you would put them right next to each other, two heads next to each other, and then bring it around into a circle like that. So the two pieces are making a circle, and then these two tails come up and pop the balloon. So I pretend like this is a balloon. I'm going to do that again. Two friends, their heads are next to each other. They do make a little circle, and then these tails come up through that circle and pop the balloon. Then I hold on to both, pull them nice and tight, just like that. At the end of this, if you want to trim this up, you can. Again, I always caution people when they are using scissors next to their loom to be very careful. If you clip these, it's very hard to fix. So I'm just going to continue weaving along. A couple of things that you want to keep in mind, and a couple of things that I see from some students, is they start pulling too tight. If you start pulling too tight, what happens is it kind of goes inward. See how it's starting to go inward? And it makes like an hourglass instead of a nice rectangle. Our goal is to leave it into a rectangle. So when you get to the edge, I did say pull it nice and tight, but don't pull it so tight that it starts pulling in the strings. You want it to just nicely hug the edge of each weaving. So I'm going back in, and when I pull this, pull, 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 nicely hug the edge there, just like that. One way to spice this up is to use beads. If you would like, every once in a while you can add a bead. My rule is one bead per string. So I have this blue yarn, and I can put a bead on here kind of in the middle of my weaving, or however you'd like to do that. Now on top here, I just noticed that I went on top, so this one I go under. There we go. Gets a little confusing, so you want to be very good at weaving before you start adding extra things like beads. You want to feel pretty confident, but it does give it a little bit more interest.